Do sit down. We're just about to have some tea.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not panic, but scream. Scream for your lives.
Hail weirdos, the kettle's boiled. Welcome to Tea for Terror, where we take a favourite horror film and dissect it over a nice cup of tea. I'm your host, Andrew Graves, and my guest today is here to tell us to take the third channel off, to stop it, please. For God's sake, please stop it. There's no more time. Welcome, James Whittington. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, Andrew, that's a great introduction. That it's exactly like the film.
Yeah, it's like you're always there.
I was there.
Yeah. So, how you doing? What have you been up to?
Really, we're getting ready for NYX UK to launch properly onto Freeview soon. We're just getting all that ready. Free-to-air content is sparse at the moment for horror fans, and I think they found a nice gap in the market. It's available on their website at the moment and through Freeview, through channel blocks and things like that. But this is the first dedicated channel they're going to have, so fingers crossed that goes okay over the next few weeks.
Okay, so do you know? Because I got to know you via different people, friends of friends, and I know some people will know you through your connection with what was the Horror Channel but is now called Legend. So do you want to tell us how you got involved in that and the sort of process and what your angle is?
Well, Horror Channel as originally was what was based up here in the Northeast, and I just came across it by accident on the website looking for freelance work. And I noticed on their website there was an error or a fact that was wrong about the film. So, being the type of geeky fan I am, I emailed them and said, "By the way, did you know this is wrong?" And they said, "All right, thanks for letting us know. If there's anything else, please get in touch." And I spotted 2 or 3 more and got in touch and said, "Look, let's have a meeting, okay?" And at the time, it was a very small crew, and they had this fictional character called Jason Jones, who used to do the editorial and stuff like that, and said, "Look, do you want to be Jason Jones for a while?" And I think this was about 2005, 2006. And yeah, of course, I want to do that. Horror has always been a passion of mine, because I was writing for Dark Side at the time as well. And it went from there. I started doing more features and then news features, articles, interviews, posting on the website, expanding content. And then it was bought by a company called Zone in about 2006, and everybody got moved down to London, and they kept me on, and actually I'm still with them now. I do all the Legend website and social feeds and things like that, so it's a different base, it's different genres now. It's not for horror fans anymore, except for the Vintage Vault on a Saturday, on a Sunday night, but it's still a really good quality channel, like $6 Million Man's on there and things like that, so there's plenty for me to enjoy as well as everybody else. So that basically is I've been lucky to stay with them all the way through this.
Yeah, I guess because to be honest, like a lot of people, I don't spend a lot of time watching sort of live TV as it happens, because that's the nature of how things are. I'm kind of busy, and usually stream stuff or whatever, or physical media. But I guess when I do sit down, things like Legend and maybe Talking Pictures are something I would, certainly tap into. Someone be of a certain age, you can't, it is, and both, I guess, and certainly with Legend and those TV shows, like you mentioned, like $6 Million Man and stuff like that. I mean, it's always going to attract a certain audience, and because there is something. I mean, yeah, we can always buy the box sets, and obviously, I'm surrounded by box sets. I'm a box set kind of guy, but there's something nice. I mean, what I really like about those kind of channels is that when me and my wife go on, if we go on holiday in this country, we tend to go to like Scarborough and places like that. I like the sort of North Coast. And what's nice about it is that very often we'll be staying in a little B&B or a little cottage or whatever, and you just basically get what there is. It's kind of very analog sort of TV setup. There's not like hundreds of channels. It's just, and I like it when there's like limit. Sometimes when you're faced with a complete limitation, it takes me back to being a kid, and it's like, because
Yeah.
I've said over and over again on this podcast, one of the reasons I'm into the kind of films I'm into is because you were exposed to them at a fairly young age. Had I had access to a 24-hour cartoon channel, then I would have watched that, definitely. But because I
Yeah.
wasn't, I got into sort of Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi and all these things that I wouldn't have had access to, or I wouldn't,
Yeah.
I'd have bypassed when I was younger if I'd had stuff that was made deliberately for me. Fortunately, depending on how you look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't. So, yeah, but so I think those little niche channels, I think they're still really important, and I think I'm glad that they're still there. And into it's similar in a way to sort of physical media. I mean, to most people, physical media doesn't exist. It's kind of
Yeah.
a bygone thing. But to me, I earn part of my living through writing for physical media products, but also I love them. I just
Yeah.
love,
Yeah.
love the feat, and I think part of that will never die.
No.
People kind of wrote off vinyl, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Look at it now.
Exactly, and because there is some, we are quite, maybe it is an age thing, I don't know, but I think there is part of us which is very, we like tangible things. We like to have them in our hands. So yeah, and I think that channels are a little bit like that as well.
Yeah, I think we were really lucky just to have the 3 channels and the 4 channels when growing up, because we were exposed to some really good quality television. If we had too much choice when we were younger, we wouldn't know about some of these things, like the Incredible Hulk and Wonder Woman and the A-Team and things like that. Stuff that will always sell, on box sets, Blu-rays, and inevitable 4K release later on. But if it's on if it's on TV, like I will always watch $6 Million Man or Doctor Who or a Hammer film. Even if I've got it, even if I've gotten Laserdisc or if I've gotten new 4K, I will watch it. And I think that's where we're lucky, because we know we can appreciate what went to these pieces of TV and cinema.
Yeah. So, James, because obviously you mentioned, you're passionate about horror, and obviously your connection with Legend and the Horror Channel and all that stuff. So, but what was really your entry point into horror? How we've kind of touched upon it there, but is there any sort of key entry points for you in terms of why you ended up being obsessed with it?
I think it's the classic staying up on a Saturday night, double bills on BBC Two. And then in the Northeast, I don't know if you had it around the country, we had also had a strand on our regional TV on a Friday night called Fear on Friday.
Yep.
And they used to show the more bloody stuff, like the more amicus horror. And I think because I was young and staying up late to watch that with my dad was a key element. I think that's something I still carry on watching horror films with my 2 daughters who love watching certain horror. And I think it brings back so many fond memories of growing up and watching these things. And I was lucky enough to go through the video nasties age and, getting exposed to Fulci young and things like that. It was just something about watching something with my dad, watching something that was slightly scary, and he was enjoying it because he'd seen most of them in the cinema at the time. He would say, "We'd have to watch this one," and he'd inevitably fall asleep, halfway through the first one, and I'd watch it. But I think it's because of, and that connection was straight there. It makes me feel happy and warm. And I can't put a horror film on without thinking of my dad. It doesn't matter what it is. I always think of watching films like that.
Yeah, and again, I mentioned this before, but I think as much as because I've said it a lot, but I'm a big advocate of 21st century horror. I think there's some superb stuff being made this century. I think it's brilliant stuff.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there's no doubt that, like a lot of people, unlike yourself, real nostalgia for those kind of Saturday nights, and I'm sure they were much rarer, there, and they were kind of regular every year sort of thing for a while. But yeah, I'm exactly the same. I remember it was my dad. My dad was a miner, and so as miners did, it pissed at the weekend and come back with lots of bags of chips for me and my brother and my mum, and we'd sit and watch those horror films on a Saturday night. It's just, that's for me. That's just my upbringing. That's all I can think of is the smell of chips. My dad's crap aftershave, high karate or whatever it was,
Yes.
and Boris Karloff. That's it. That's who I was when I was that age, and thank God that
Mhm.
parents were more slack in the 70s. They just did, I
Yeah.
remember my mom. I'd been to bed for like 2 hours or whatever.
Mhm.
It must have been like 7 or 8, and my mum waking me up and saying, "Oh, the horror films just started downstairs. Come on."
Yeah.
When would that happen now?
You
So
wouldn't do that
yeah,
for romantic comedy, would you?
no, no, you wouldn't. No, you
Quick,
wouldn't.
there's a romantic comedy double bill on. You've got to go and see it.
But I think it's because
That's exactly it.
they knew I was obsessed with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Again, it's like and obsessed to the point of I had the Alan Frank books and the Dennis Gifford books, and
Yeah.
just flicking through those and waiting for those films to come on TV, and just hoping and praying that you could watch them all, and tick them off your list. I wasn't a sports fan, so horror was
No.
sports to me. It was just that
No.
was it, Horror
I'm
and
not built for
comics.
sport.
Yeah,
Horror and comics, yeah. I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
built for sport. I'm definitely built for sitting down and appreciating film. You know.
Yes.
But yeah,
Oh,
those books I used to have those ones. Yeah, the covers just grabbed you straight away anyway,
yeah.
and the full color pictures. I remember poring over them. I used to have the Osborne book guides to the supernatural and things like that, and
Yeah, yeah,
collected
yeah,
the
yeah.
Unexplained
Yes.
magazine, the Part Works,
Yes.
and I remember that having a flexi disc with the first issue that was meant to be EVPs of Winston Churchill and things like that. Absolute rubbish, but it was great. If I had it now, I would still listen to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was because, like I said, like Dennis Gifford and your Alan Frank books, but yeah, it was as much about those unexplained magazines and
Mhm.
this stuff that might have been real. Most of it was bollocks, but it might have been
Yeah,
real. And Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and all that.
yeah,
I think that used to kind of shit me up more than sort of a classic horror film because there was always this because it was Arthur C. Clarke and he was a serious guy and it was like obviously he was just doing a bit of old flannel just to get some money towards the end of his career. But as far as you were aware as a kid, it was all this is real, what's happening?
this happens.
And I remember, I think it was one New Year's Eve. I don't know if you remember. There was, I think it was 19. It was the cusp of 79, 80, I think. And there
Mhm.
was like a UF. I remember there was like a UF. I think it turned out to be Venus or something like that. But there's a
Yeah,
big story on the news on New Year's Eve about this alien, this UFO sighting.
yeah.
And I remember just shitting myself, thinking,
This is
"This
it.
is it. It's over. This is it." Expecting some sort of George Pal disaster around the corner, but yeah,
Yeah,
that was it.
absolutely. And it said it's like more simpler times.
Yeah,
That was our research, that was our Google and stuff like that. And if you missed it, you have to wait months if it ever got years before anything like that got repeated.
well,
Now it's
exactly.
just
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
There were certain things, I mean, there's still certain films there's a couple of films from that Gifford book which I've still not seen because I don't think you
no,
can. They exist in physical media form. But
yeah,
I remember, seeing that as I've mentioned before, but seeing in the Alan Frank book that still from Freaks and just being
wow, what is
gobsmacked by
this?
what is this and
Mhm.
thinking I am never going to see that film. It's been banned for 30 years. I'm never going to see that film.
We've
And
got no chance.
now, the Blu-ray's out on Monday, and I'm the
Yeah.
Criterion Blu-ray with with the unknown and stuff like that. And it's like wow, it all comes to pass eventually. So
Mhm.
hopefully, all of those things will be released before I cark it.
Oh, plenty of time
so,
yet.
so I can tick my boxes. Yeah, I think we'll go into the film we're going to look at today. So we are going to examine Halloween 3, Season of the Witch from 1982.
Halloween 3, season of the witch, the night no one comes home.
So, James, when was the first time you came across this film?
It was, I remember seeing a cover of Fangoria, and it had the witch image on the cover, the black and white one. I think it was issue 22, 23, and it was the back end of 82. I saw it. And it also had a feature with Pink Floyd The Wall. So it helped me get to Pink Floyd at the same time. And I just remember thinking, oh, I've heard of Halloween. I've heard that it's brilliant. I think before this was a Halloween had been on TV. May not. Either way, I wasn't aware it was Carpenter at all. I just thought there was something about that image that grabbed me, and I read the feature and I thought, this is going to be brilliant. And I didn't see it for about 3 or 4 years till it actually came on for rental. I think it was about 85, 86 when it came for rental, and that's when the first time I saw it. And I just didn't realise, how completely different it was to the series of the Halloween movies when I eventually got to see it. And I just thought it was brilliant. I thought this was Twilight Zone next level, maybe a good combination, because the Outer Limits was always a more serious, I thought, series to the Twilight Zone. I thought this would be brilliant as an anthology series, and unfortunately that never happened. And seeing the film for the first time, because I didn't know it was cut when it's still cut, I think, in the UK. And I just thought it was a brilliant idea, a really, like The Thing, a really down film, if you know what I mean. It was very real. It was very gritty. There's no real heroes in it as such. Everybody was fallible in it. Like Tom Atkins' role, as a failed parent, getting divorced. Even though later on he does get off with a woman considerably younger than him.
We'll come back to Tom Atkins in a second. Yeah. I just think there was something while I read in that Fangoria article. I just thought, this is going to be good. This is going to be different. This is witchcraft, science fiction, possibly violence. I just read it about that. And that's what really grabbed me. Yeah, well, because it's obviously it's based on an idea that initially Nigel Neal had come up with, obviously from Quatermass and all that kind of stuff. So it was that kind of much more science fiction-y stroke supernatural type horror, and obviously it became a very quickly became a fairly bastardized version of what Nigel Neal had done. I know Nigel Neal ripped his name off the product, but that was the starting point. But it is, I think the interesting thing about it is, because I think it's a great idea, it's a great premise, and it was very brave to go in a completely different direction, sort of midway through a franchise. But I think it has this it just feels there's something more uncanny about it, but it also, the other thing it taps into is that what really the first films, obviously Halloween 78 would have been a theatrical, all these films had theatrical releases, but very much it was only a theatrical release. And then you had the second film, which was really still before the video age had really kicked off. But I think by the time you get to this one, whether they intended it or not, this is very clearly a film that it's not a video nasty, but it is very aware that there is a new way of viewing films now. And I think, in that sense, it's it didn't do that well at the box office, which is why they ended up going back to Michael Myers for the fourth installment. Although, to be fair, I was checking the figures and stuff, and actually, even though they were very down, the producers were very down on this film because it didn't do as well as the others, Halloween 4 didn't really do that much better than this film. So it wasn't necessarily about Michael Myers, but I guess it was just people's perception of that franchise and what they're expecting. For me, just on paper, as much as I love Carpenter's original Halloween, and I have a soft spot for Halloween too, as much as Halloween is great, if I was going to do a franchise, I would do this. This seems like it could build into a bigger world, because what you've got with Halloween, which I think, you know, it ran its course years ago to me.
Yeah,
It's just
absolutely.
a guy going back into the same street. That's far more limiting,
Yeah.
really, for storytelling purposes. This can go on and on and on. The whole idea of Silver Shamrock, that could be
Yeah.
anything, you know, that could just go on and on.
It's very apocalyptic in its theme for that. You know, it's a global horror rather than like an urban horror. And I think that's what did it, because going back to what got me into horror, my dad used to fix cars up for his friends on a night for extra money. And so we had a car part shops down the street. And this is during a time when anywhere could you have a rental library, and being a car part shop, the titles were a little bit more non-family friendly. So I saw Cannibal Ferox and Cannibal Holocaust long before I saw this. So, you know, I was used to gore and things like that and extreme horror. But there was just something about Halloween 3 that I just thought it was clean. It was clean horror. The tension, especially at the beginning of the film, and the score, you know, is just brilliant, you know. And that's what, you know, gave me a fresh perspective on horror, because I was used to really extreme Italian horror by then. You know, Hammer slightly bored me because I was an impressionable teenager and I wanted to brag about what I'd seen. But there was just something about this, and you know, the amount of layers you can see on it now. I just don't know why it didn't really find an audience.
Yeah, it's odd, because it does seem to tap into a lot of things that perhaps, you know, even something like Halloween 2, which I don't mind, but it you know, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't really go anywhere. It's just simply a slightly weaker version of the first film. And there's some good stuff in it, but yeah, but this is like you said, it's it's one of those. It's one of those. I mean, it's obviously become a much bigger sort of cult thing, and you know, and I'm sure, like yourself, I'm on a lot of sort of cult collectors sites and things like that on Facebook, and people are obsessed with this film. You know, much more than Halloween 2, which kind of did well initially at the box office.
Yeah,
this didn't, but I think in the long run, people are more obsessed with this. This is the one that people would want. You know, they want that kind of boutique Blu-ray box set of, you know, because people do scrabble after this one, and it is. I don't know. It seems odd that that it didn't sort of catch fire straight away, because it's got a lot of elements. Because I think obviously Halloween is, you know, made in the 70s. It's a very 70s film, and you can say that the second film is still has that hangover of the 70s. And there is still a whiff of the 70s in this one, but it feels more progressive. It feels like it's aware, in the same way that American Werewolf in London it feels like an 80s film, whereas The Howling came out the same year, feels like a 70s film, and it taps into a lot of concerns and fears of the 70s. I think this one has that kind of, you know, obviously we've got Tom Atkins, who is the archetypal hero. But, you know, absolutely. I mean, you know, I love him. You know, God bless him. Yeah. I like him in Maniac Cop and all that kind of stuff. And but what I do think is really charming about this is it's not so much he's miscast, because he's good at that kind of hero thing. It's just the fact that they give him. He's supposed to be a doctor, and he's like, he's not spent one day in university, let alone 7 years. There's no fucking way this character has sat down and done his studying. There's absolutely no fucking way. It's like when they do sort of films with The Rock or whatever, or, you know, Dwayne Johnson, and he's meant to be some sort of you know, marine biologist or something. It's like, the fuck off.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a big no.
He should be punching tanks, not studying fish, you know, or whatever. But it's that kind of thing. And I do think, you know, I love it, but let's face it, there are some very cheesy scenes in this. I mean, you know, even by 80s standards, they're very cheesy. The whole sort of shall I sleep on the floor or shall I sleep in the car or well, yeah, it's just like, oh God, it's the now it kind of grates a little bit because she's clearly like 20 years younger than him, and it's like, oh.
Absolutely.
And
But then
she's just lost a relative.
said,
She's meant to be in
yeah,
mourning, but
yeah, but he got off with Jamie Lee Curtis in the fog,
exactly,
so
exactly.
I mean, I wonder what he'd done if he'd been involved in this sort of Carpenter production after that. Who would have slept with then?
Yeah,
But yeah, he is a bit two dimensional, but it fits the quickness of the story, doesn't it?
yeah. What? Let's just wind back a little bit because I mean, if we
Mhm.
talk about, I mean, how do you feel about the original Halloween in '78? Because I mean, it is, most people, it's almost like sacrilege to say anything bad about it. I'm
Mhm.
not saying I am going to say anything bad about it, but I'm just
Yeah,
wondering
yeah.
what your feelings are. Because to me, it's a great Carpenter film. I'm not sure it's my favorite Carpenter film, though.
It's a great film. It's a good solid film, saved by its score and the Dean Cundy did the cinematography, and obviously the opening shot is just magnificent, copied to death by countless other people. It is plodding at times, and the dialogue, bless them, even teenagers in the '70s didn't speak like that. But it is a good, effective horror. The lack of blood is always a surprise. And it's all horny teenagers who all look 45, like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
did in
yeah,
all
yeah,
American
yeah.
films in the '70s. But to me, it's a good film. I do like the extended cut, the TV version that gives
Yeah.
Loomis more time to talk about stuff like that. But Donald Pleasance is just brilliant in this, and I think he spent the rest of his career trying to top that and couldn't. And the second one, like you mentioned, it's just a by the numbers sequel, really. Let's get
Yeah.
get Jamie Lee's name in here, but put her in bed for most of the movie, like Halloween Kills, and
Yeah.
you know, God, was it catchphrase from Halloween Kills?
Oh,
So it stops tonight. Was it
yeah, yeah,
Death
yeah.
stops tonight or
Something.
something?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They
it's
say
so
they
bad.
say
I'm not.
they say a couple of times during that film, don't they? Just they mention it
Yeah,
once or twice, don't they? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But the photography, it really is what Halloween, the original one's all about. It's amazing. The setups, from the leaves falling down, even though that all that was just put on for the film, and the shots, the use of CinemaScope, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, and there are some brilliant. I mean, it's a very quiet film at times, and
Hmm.
and obviously coupled with the music is great as well. But my favorite, one of my favorite, and and I say every time I watch it, I say this. My favorite bits is the car. When she gets in the car and it's
Hmm.
steamed up, and she suddenly
Yeah.
realizes that this is caused by somebody's breath. It's brilliant. It's really
Hmm.
well done. So
Hmm.
there's great stuff in it. What about? I mean, going even further back, because this obviously comes up quite a lot when we talk about Halloween, and it's almost become a cliche, but I think there is something in it.
Hmm.
What do you think of? Have you seen Black Christmas? What do you
Yeah.
think of Black Christmas? Because
Yeah.
I love
That
that film.
it is good. That shows you that's more of a hack and slash one that's very raw. That's it's almost exploitation level, but it's so well done.
Yeah,
And I know the audience grew afterwards for it, but I really do think that it's on par with Halloween. And it's maybe it'd be a bit too nasty for people at times, but it's I don't know. Again, the set pieces in that are brilliant. The phone calls. That was very original at the time. How he was speaking to people, the whispering and things like that. I just thought, and it was a great cast. You
yeah.
know,
It yeah, like I said, the phone calls, it's great, and I think
Mhm,
the fact that they're trying to trace the call and the
mhm,
physical, obviously now it would be very different digital, but
mhm,
then they're trying to physically trace it. It's really, really good, and I think, yeah, I think the cliche is, oh, Carpenter borrowed a lot from this. I don't know whether he did, whether he was aware of it or not.
mhm,
It doesn't really matter because I think you can still enjoy both films, and there's still
mhm.
I marginally prefer Black Christmas because I think it's just got
Right.
more of a. It's kind of a film I dig out at Christmas and I'll watch it, in December,
Mhm,
and I like which is slightly different to Halloween, but I like the tonal shifts in it as well, which is
Mhm.
not all everybody's cup of tea, but I like the fact that you've got these black comedy elements. You've got the housekeeper who's pissed all the time, and all that kind of stuff. It's really good, and I love all that. Yeah, but I think the one thing, Carpenter. Obviously, Carpenter is a great filmmaker, and he deserves the respect he's got. But I think other than the fact that there is possibly this kind of Black Christmas link, the people don't often necessarily link, because Carpenter. You're not telling me that Carpenter didn't take a lot from sort of Italian giallo cinema, particularly that the point of view shots. Carpenter's often cited as being, we kind of came up with that. No, he fucking didn't. Giallo. People Mario Bava and Argento and people like that were doing it way before then.
Michael Myers could have been wearing a black glove through most of the film.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you're right, the setups, and you're seeing the blade coming down. It only lacks the blood, giallo, or however you pronounce it, giallos. Just like the blood. The boobs were there, just like the blood.
Yeah.
Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
So James, obviously we're talking about the Halloween franchise and Halloween 3 in particular. But I was thinking, as a slight tangent, what are your personal thoughts on Halloween, the holiday, as they call it in America? Because obviously Halloween, it's become a lot more commercial over here, but I still think it's still a kind of half-assed version to what the Americans do, and I think most people have a different take on it in this country. So what's your view on Halloween as we see it on American screens as compared to the reality of it over here?
Yeah, I've never witnessed anything as exuberant as America always does it. When I was younger, we didn't even have pumpkins. We used to carve turnips, or starters, we used to call them, and it used to take forever. Small as turnip, and you scoop, and then you put a black bin liner on, for like a witch's cape. If you could get one of those cheap plastic masks, similar to what Tom's character in Halloween 3 buys for his children, and they hate. We used to wear those. You just couldn't. And that was, then trick or treating. To have a really bad, long white candle that used to burn your hands as you walked across the place. I've never seen anything that's been as well done as the American version. We never got as much candy as they did either.
No. I mean, like a lot of things when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, it was kind of everything. You just wanted to be in America, didn't you? That was it. It was just like, and you looked at, as much as I enjoyed being a kid for a lot of the time, looking back, the 70s especially was a pretty fucking grim place in this country. It was. It's okay if you're a kid, but I think if you're an adult in the 70s, it's fucking grim. And I think there was always, and I was the same. Pumpkins. What were they? You didn't have pumpkins. We had a little turnip, and I had a little birthday candle inside it, or something like that.
That's really pitiful. That.
And but my mate, we went out trick or treating with him. I got like a little turnip. He didn't even have that. He had a potato. Fucking potato. It's like, Jesus. Yeah. It's like, but now it's like, it gets to sort of mid-September and the supermarkets are just full of costumes. They're just going to be chucked in fucking landfill like a week later or whatever. It's just so. I always feel, I kind of like the whole Shocktober thing. I get why people are into it, and I get why horror fans might want to be into it. But for me, it is that it is kind of that thing of. Leave my thing alone. You can't have it. I know that's churlish, and I should be kind of encouraging more people to be into horror. But I hate this thing of like, it's October, I'll watch some horror films. You can watch them any time you like. You don't have to wait till October.
Yeah,
but
it becomes like a trend.
Yeah,
in a fashion. That's it. And
Yeah.
people are experts in Halloween or Friday the 13th or so. All of a sudden, and then they don't watch them again for another 11 months.
Yeah, in the same way that I will probably watch a football match every 4 years, that's probably it. Like, that's probably my limit. And but I don't.
Yeah.
But the difference is, I don't pretend to be an expert. I know fuck
Yeah.
all about football. I know my stuff when it comes to horror films. I really fucking do. So
Yeah.
stay off my patch. Get off my
Pumpkin patch.
or me turnip patch.
His potato patch.
Yeah. If you're the poorer kid down the road, yeah.
Oh, bless him.
I think what this film, I think this is probably the residue of kind of Nigel Neal, is that we are presented with this, supernatural stroke science fiction type force, which in this case comes in the form of a celebrated company, this Silver Shamrock company, and we've got Dan O'Hurley as the Cochrane, and he had he started in the mid-40s his film career. He had you talk about prolific. He had a prolific film career, but of course a lot of people would know him as that. From this film as being the sort of corporation head, but obviously in RoboCop as well, he does a very similar sort. But I think there is something slightly more. I mean, in RoboCop, it's over the top black comedy. That it's a very satirical film. I think this is satirical as well, in a slightly different way. I do think, as with Dawn of the Dead from a few years earlier, which obviously, people celebrate as being this thing which is anti-commercialism, all this kind of stuff, and this suggestion of the zombies wandering around a supermarket, a shopping mall, just, loading the trolleys or whatever. Obviously, very sort of anti-capitalist, anti-commercial. But I think you could argue that this, I mean, I don't think it's shoved in your face in quite the same way, but it is it's looking at, well, do we need to commercialize something like Halloween in this way, but also on a wider level, this is about America. And I think it's interesting that one of the most one of the characters, the key characters, is Buddy and his wife and his kid, and they're going around the factory at Cochrane's kind of behest, him being this kind of biggest salesman, and it almost, it kind of feels like, he's just swallowing this shit, and he doesn't even, he wouldn't question it for a second, even though he's walking into his death, he would not question this shit for a second. And there are parallels with what's happening now in America, all the kind of Trump thing and the people how people just believe stuff. I think it really does tap into that, this film. It says a lot about that kind of American corporate bullshit, these lies that are just thrust on people.
Yeah, and the commercialism of it as well. It's the adverts were constantly on, and it made parents or the children make the parents buy the product. This is the must-have. This is the must-have, and this came at the height of the Cabbage Patch Kids phenomenon at the same time in America. And it's only in retrospect, going back over the last few years, you realise these subtleties all the way through it, and how this big corporation took over this town and hollowed it out and took it over, and you knew the people had to do everything the factory managers said, because if they left that town, there'd be nothing, and like you say, parents, your dad was a miner, my dad was a miner. When the mine shut down, places did become desolate, and that was true. What would have happened when the mines closed down in my area? Shops closed, people moved away, and it took years to regenerate. I think that fear is there all the way through that film, subtly. I think that's a really great part of the script and of that.
And I think, I know, I know there's certainly, I'm Nottinghamshire based, but there's certainly parts of Nottinghamshire which have never regenerated, really. Not they're still half empty. They're still, mostly boarded up and stuff like that. It just never really took off. So I think there's a lot of stuff, because I think in that sense it's not as grim maybe, but I think in some ways there are connections with a film like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is about you know, we can see this bizarre cannibalistic family, but they are the remnants of what happens when the corporates sweep in and decimate an area and there's nothing left, you know, and they literally turn to eating each other, you know. But I think also you could look from a few years later after this film, something like you know, Child's Play. You know, and that's you know, that sense of commercialization, like you're saying, you know, toys being thrust in your face, and that kind of those Cabbage Patch Kids or whatever the fad is for that year, and this kind, you have to have this, and I think that was a really good sort of summation of that. You know, this toy will literally kill you. You know, this thing will run around in your house with an axe or a knife or whatever coming after you. I think that's a really good, whether they intended it or not, it feels like a damnation of that sort of over commercialization aimed at children. You know, and sort of some of those issues were kind of you know, born out, I think, you know, with a look at with the fuss they made of Child's Play 3, which was seemingly responsible for the Bulger murder case. Absolute tosh, you know. You've got to look at the stuff that was going on in those kids' families at the time, and that's more difficult to talk about and process. It's easier to blame a video, a straight to video nasty piece, you know. So I think that this film is kind of part and parcel of that. I think he's got a lot to say about that stuff, and it does it really cleverly and entertainingly, because I think that's the other thing. And I think sometimes what we've lost within horror films or science fiction is that you either have to have something that is over the top and kind of throwaway and sort of more vacuous, and it's the spectacle, or you have the kind of art house film that deals with these issues, you know. But it's perfect. This film shows, and a lot of films showed in the 80s, that it's perfectly possible to do both. RoboCop was a big, spectacular science fiction blockbuster action film, which was about as satirical as you could get and incredibly political. This film is as well. You know, They Live by Carpenter, you know, later on. That is a very sort of funny, entertaining, but also makes incredibly serious points about just blindly following what your government says you should do. You know, all of this kind of stuff. So it's really, it doesn't have to be art house or throwaway. No. You can do both, and I think it's a tougher gig to do that. So maybe that's why there's this separation, you know. But I think you can do something which is entertaining and big, blockbuster-ish, and say something as well. You know. And
I know Tommy Lee Wallace, you know, directed it and that, but it's Carpenter all the way through, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's definitely. It has absolutely the feel of Carpenter, you know, and obviously they were there. You know, Deborah Hill and Carpenter were there to produce it, and I don't think they wanted initially. They didn't want anything to do with the third Halloween film because. You know, as we've said, you know, it's kind of run its course. So they weren't keen on bringing Michael Myers back. So they said the condition being, we'll do this and want to do something different. And I think that's what you get with this film. Now, unfortunately, I think what horror film, or some people who kind of want to be horror films, and again, it's something where, to me, as much as I have that nostalgia for certain films, I want the next thing. I want the next thing, and but I don't think that that's necessarily what a lot of other people want when it comes to horror. I think they want a repetition. You know, they want to see Jason, you know, hacking people up, and they want to see another version of Michael Myers. But I'm always looking or rooting for people that are trying to do something different and strange and take it away from what I think this was a really brave thing to do. And I think in the long run now it's seen as more of a classic. But I think, it's a shame that it wasn't really picked up on then, because I think it has that sort of Rod Serling sort of Twilight Zone-ish quality as well.
And it stays with you because you realise the true horror of this is the sacrificing children for
Yeah,
this
yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah,
ancient
yeah.
pagan god. You know how more horrific can you get? You know, he's planning a global, deaths of millions and billions of children, and that's the true horror of it, without having to really emphasize the point. That yes, it does when the salesman in the year gets to tour the factory, and that sequence the mum and dad and the son has when they're watching the advert, all the snakes and spiders come out their melted faces when they've had the masks on. Even though that horror's there, you don't really realize at the end when he's trying to shut down the TV station. Oh my God, all these kids are going to die, and this is part of the plan. And do they or don't they? And that's a brilliant cliffhanger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, like you say, there's something a bit like you say it with Michael Myers, it's limited. It's just one guy
Mm-hmm.
coming to hack some people up. Yeah, Carpenter did some really interesting stuff with the first film, but after that, there's nothing else to really say, and obviously a legion of horror fans disagree with me, but for me, there's
Yeah.
nothing else to say. This has something to say about a lot of stuff, and I think it says it really well in an entertaining way.
But that's the problem with the last 2 or 3 Scream movies. It's just repetition. It's very formulaic. It's just going to be jump scare, death, jump scare, death, and that's it. And I will go and see Scream 7 when it comes out. Like I went and saw Exorcist Believer because I wanted to see it. But at least with Saw X, they did something different. It's very, very. The first hour isn't a Saw film. It's brilliant. It's very subtle. It's very dramatic. Tobin Bell acts his socks off. It's really, really good. And that at least they did something totally different. Obviously, the
Yeah.
last 45 minutes it's a Saw film, but they're just not trying. And Halloween Ends was just awful.
Yeah, I think it's just there's a difference between it's like something I think it's good to be aware of what's gone in the past, and I think you can echo those films without actually doing those films again. Something like X to me, that obviously there are many nods to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's also framing it in a way which is a more intelligent take on that, and it's kind of, whereas Texas Chainsaw Massacre was made in 74 and we can view it as a film made in 74, X is clearly a modern film which is using that aesthetic but presenting it to a 21st century audience. So I think it's more it's as interesting because it's doing something different with it. To just repeat a formula over and over again, I think
So I think
it's endemic of a wider studio head sort of executive thing, in that they generally misinterpret what made a film popular in the first place.
But I think that's Halloween Ends has the best 10 minutes I've seen in horror for a while. That sequence is brilliant, and the way it has the same text font as Halloween 3 did. Little things like that was great. It went too much on a tangent to be interesting. There was, it was too much. Oh, I'm sorry. There's not enough Laurie and Michael to really put a full end to the film. And it just seemed like, oh, we've got to put Michael in. Let's have the last 10 minutes and it'll be okay. You went from Killing Machine to like OAP over the course of the films. The last 2 especially. But I always thought Halloween 3 would have been really good if they'd done it the same way as they did Friday the 13th, the series, and had it stylized like that, and maybe done it as a TV movie. Even though it's great as a film, I love it as a film. Maybe done that would have found a broader audience.
Yeah, I think you can. I'm not saying don't revisit stuff, because I think it's always good to do that. Some of my favourite films have been remakes, absolutely. The Thing, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, all that, I could go on and on and on.
Yeah. The Dawn of the Dead one for me was just...
it's good.
That was superb,
I always feel like Zack Snyder, I feel like, because I think a lot of his stuff I really don't like.
No.
But I always feel like if he does make a good film, it's almost like by accident. It's like, because I think Dawn of the Dead is genuinely good. And I think it's good because you can see it's not just about riffing on the first film, the Romero original. You can see elements of zombie flesh eaters in there and stuff like that. He kind of knows that stuff, so it's good to draw that in. But I think it was something like Watchmen. I mean, I was a massive Alan Moore fan, and I loved the comic books, and so I was kind of very trepidatious when he did that. And I think he looks good, but I'm not convinced he has any understanding really of the material that Alan Moore was dealing with. It's a very surface level interpretation, I think.
Very few places do.
But I think that in terms of revisiting stuff, I mean, coincidentally, I've just started watching the new version of Interview with the Vampire, which it's an AMC production, but it's on BBC iPlayer. It's really good. I was kind of like, oh, do we need another version of this? You know, I really like it. I really rate it. I think what they've done with it, you know, they've gone for more diverse casting and all this, and they've shifted the date so it kind of starts, rather than starting slightly early, it starts in 1910s, and you've got Louis is now like a black character who's a pimp, but it's really interesting.
It works.
Really ramp up the sexual sort of side of it as well. And I know I can see, when I'm watching it, I can see what the complaints will be on certain cult horror forums. Oh, well, you know, Lestat wasn't gay, or this wasn't happening. It's like, oh, fuck off, you know, as if it's not about fucking that book is not about male seduction. What the fuck is it about? You know, for Christ's sake, you know what I mean? So it's like when people moan about Dracula, like the recent version of Dracula where a TV version where he was bisexual, and people were complaining about that. It's like, for fuck's sake, he rips people's throats out. You've got no problem with that.
Be worried about
somebody
that.
whining about him being a fucking bisexual. For fuck's sake. On that bombshell. Any other thoughts on Halloween 3?
Yeah, I what I loved, like, we're going back to the key scenes in the film. There's that many really good key scenes. Is the hospital scene after the guy's been stalked, who stole a mask from the factory at the beginning. That murder scene, referring to the uncut version, is just brilliant. It's very, you know, again, Tommy Wallace uses Carpenter's score and Alan Howard's score because they did it together to prime effect. It's very simple score. The explosion, you know, it really sets the tone of the film, and the little touches, the nods, like when he's in the bar. And the Silver Shamrock advert's on for the first time, which is the best jingle in the world ever written. When it fades off and Michael Myers mask's on screen, which I'd never seen before. I saw the 4K. I'd never seen that. And then the meta part, seeing the Halloween TV spot on when he's trying to watch football in the bar. You know, I think that's brilliant. But I do think Conal Cochran is just one of the best buddies in a horror film. Because I know he didn't really like the picture when it was finished, but I just think the way his smarminess with the families is just perfectly captured. You know, he's very Trump-esque, smoozing people, you know, playing up to the part, the character and things like that. You know, he's evil, but he's a really good bad guy. You know, and the way it talks about commerciality, the way the Carpenter went on and did They Live. You know, that was just, you know, that was probably one of his greatest films ever. That was totally misunderstood for years anyway. And the way it just talks about corporate, but in a language everybody understands. Everybody's had the pressure to buy something.
It's also that idea of Cochrane. I really like how they kind of drip feed it, because they talk, you know, when Buddy and his family come and they're going through the museum and he's saying, oh, look at all this classic stuff, and you know, this is how he started off by making practical jokes, and the extension of that being, well, why, you know, because you know, Tom Atkins as Dan says to him, why are you doing this? And he says, oh, it's a joke. It's a joke. Guys, just what is the best joke I could think of? You know, it's just this, you know, torturing people at Halloween through commerciality and all this kind. It's brilliant. It's really good.
Do you think it would have? So do you think it would have been the same if? Because I know Joe Dante was attached to the project and left it to do a segment in the Twilight Zone movie. How do you think it would have felt then? Its tone.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of one of I don't mind the I love Joe Dante, and I don't mind the Twilight Zone movie, but I'm not. There's some great segments, but I'm not over. And bizarrely, as much as I love Joe Dante, and I will defend Joe Dante to the end, I don't really like his segment in the Twilight Zone, the movie as well. But I think it could have worked in that. But I'm glad that they did it as a feature film instead. I think it would have been shortchanged slightly. I think it would have been a bit more goofy if it was in the Twilight Zone. But I think we're allowed to explore different things, and I think it becomes a more intelligent film because of that. Despite the fact that it's quite cheesy as well in some in places, actually overall it's a quite intelligent film.
Yeah, Tommy Lee Wallace keeps it fully grounded, doesn't he? It keeps everything very real. Even though obviously the idea of being able to steal a piece of Stonehenge.
Yeah, I love that. That's another thing you forget about it, until you go back to they've nicked some of Stonehenge.
What I like about the film is when he sees all the androids or robots or whatever they are still taking pieces from Stonehenge. Even though it's Halloween night, they're still producing the masks. Like, just in case it doesn't work this year, they're going to try again next year, sort of thing. Why they're still working? Everything's gone out. They could have had 5 minutes off. That's it's like those plot points. It's just where Tom Atkins becomes like the hero. Totally by default.
It's kind of like a lot of influences in this. Whether they were aware, but obviously there's very much a Stepford Wives type element and a sort of Westworldy type element as well. And but also I think there's little things like the beginning, the sort of you talked about with the guy trying to get away. That's got a very in episode 4, we covered a film called Messiah of Evil. I don't know if you're aware of that. Or you've come across it. It's a great film, and the opening sequence reminds me of that. And I think that Messiah of Evil is more sort of cultish, and it's more kind of dreamlike. But I think that both films have this kind of, there is almost a Stephen King-ish element to it as well. This idea of a small town gone wrong. Something is amiss with this, and I think that bleeds out of this film especially as well. And like you said, I mean the jingle is just fucking brilliant. It's really,
it is.
It's a really, someone said, I put some stuff on Facebook the other day that I was going to be covering this on T for Terror, and I just put the Silver Shamrock logo on as the image. And people are coming and say, "Oh, this is the most annoying jingle." I say, "It's not fucking annoying. It's brilliant. It's excellent. It's just it's amazing.
And it captures the advertising of the time, doesn't it? Because it had to be colourful, bright, and have a song that got on parents' nerves. And that caught and that's got the kids sitting there singing. And the kids would sing at the parents that actually did buy them the product. Yeah. And that was the master stroke on that.
It's kind of like a good companion piece to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I think. It's got that let's torture some kids.
Yeah, the gone wonky fact. Mind you, he did, didn't he? How many kids survived? That trip to the chocolate factory. Not many, I bet. But I think still having that little bit of Nigel Neal in it gives it gravitas. Because Quatermass was brilliant. I even enjoyed the John Mills one. And even though it seemed a little bit tied by the end, and just, you can see the little bits of Neil in it all the way through.
Yeah,
I think that would have been good. I would have loved to have seen Carpenter do a Quatermass film.
Yeah, we can dream. Yeah, that'd be good. But I like all aspects of Nigel Neal. I really rate his stuff. I even like Beasts. Can you remember that TV show?
Yeah. I've got the network DVD of that one. Yeah,
I've got the network DVD. There's some great stuff on that. The supermarket one is fantastic with Pauline Quirk. It's this weird sort of, it's like a council house Carrie, isn't she? She's it's really good.
Yeah, that's actually a movie in the making there. Council House Carrie. That'd be
Council
a good
House Carrie. Yeah.
yeah.
Go on.
I said, how much do you think Carpenter influenced Wallace's direction?
I don't know. It's a good question because I think
To me, it's like the Toby Hooper Spielberg question for Poltergeist. That keeps coming up. Does the rounds every year. Do you think Wallace had as much influence? Sorry, Campbell had much influence with Wallace, or Wallace was allowed to get on with his own vision of the script?
I don't know. I mean, it definitely feels like Carpenter and Deborah Hill are kind of all over this. It does feel like that. Whether they were on set and whether they were controlling anything, I don't really know. But it certainly feels like they had more control. Well, it's certainly they probably had more control because they wanted to have more control. I'm not sure. Obviously, Halloween was their film. Halloween 2, it was kind of like the sequel or whatever. But this feels like it has more of their influence because I think it might have been a slightly dafter film without their influence, possibly.
Yeah, and it's my fault, and I haven't mentioned Deborah Hill enough. For her production work in this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing. There's a documentary being made about the projects she made and things like that. I'm really looking forward to seeing as well because she does get left behind when it's a Carpenter Hill production, doesn't she?
Yeah.
People forget.
Yeah. I do a lot of talks at my local cinema called the Broadway, and I do a lot of film talks and sometimes do like Q&As and introductions and stuff. But and I'm doing a course at the minute called American Gothic, so I'm looking at the history of US horror. But obviously, we're going to be covering Carpenter. But yeah, I try and emphasize the influence of Deborah Hill on that sort of whole thing because I think I don't think she gets enough credit sometimes. It's always Carpenter, and if there's a restoration or if there's a revival, the magazines will have Carpenter's face on the front, and I don't think she does get enough credit often, but that's possibly our fault as well. That's it.
I'm more than guilty for doing that, that sort of thing. But yeah, but if you're going to watch Halloween 3, you've got to get the uncut version. I think Shout Factory or Scream Factory released it on the 4K. It's brilliant,
Well, when I watched it yesterday, because I've got loads of films, but I've got some of them in the attic and stuff, and I think my Halloween 3 is in the attic, so I couldn't be bothered to get it down. So I ended up finding. I went on sort of online and I found a copy, but it was literally they'd ripped it from a VHS, so I got the proper early 80s experience watching the grainy sort of the
4:3 print.
The tracking wasn't quite right, and so I had the proper. It's quite nice and refreshing to do that because I think that we've lost something with it's nice to have these kind of 4K Blu-ray stuff, but part of me thinks, well, yeah, but you should be watching Zombie Flesh Eaters as a crystal clear Blu-ray 4K production. You need it to be on VHS. That's part of its charm,
Yeah, and that harks back to what got you into horror in the first place. And I remember sitting watching on the end of my mum and dad's bed if they'd been out watching the black and white portable with a little aerial stuck on the top, trying to figure out if that's Boris Karloff's hand or his foot or when he's the mummy, and watching a film for that quality again would be something. Maybe I should be in the next retrospective I seen on TV and have it as fuzzy as that.
Yeah. So, James, have you got anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, well NYX are going to be hitting Freeview later on today. The channel is 289, so it's got to have its own dedicated Freeview channel. Where before you had to go through like to Channel Box or Distro TV and find it. So it was like a fast channel. Now it's got its own dedicated channel on Freeview, which is great. That's meant to be going live today. Hopefully that's all going well. And I'm covering festivals. The Fright Fest Halloween's coming up, so I'm going to be covering that for NYX. And hopefully get stuff now because I supply news for Dark Side, and hopefully start getting back into some features, and write books like you.
Yeah, I've got a few bits coming out with Dark Side. So yeah, they should be coming out in the next few months. Yeah, brilliant. Well, so as usual, do I really need to say this? Yeah, please like and subscribe, blah, 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 blah. You know, follow us wherever you listen to your podcast, listen to Tea for Terror. Check us out on Facebook and all that kind of jazz. It just remains for me to say thank you very much to my guest, James Whittington. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Pleasure, mate. No problem. Do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you got another film you'd really like to do, just drop me a line and you can come back on. Absolutely.
Cool.
Remember to call round next time. Make yourself at home. You look like you're dying for a nice cup of tea for terror.
And remember, my friend, future events such as these will affect you in the future.